How on earth did Australia win this test? I know we're all thinking this.
This is the last knot. My dad told me to say this.
Australia is still trying to figure out exactly what happened themselves. This is India. The tour was combusting, and every single pitch was designed for them to completely fall apart. Blades of grass are out to get Australians, or at least the fossils of something that was once grass. The wickets were so against them that they might as well have gone home already. In fact, most of them already had. The Agar saga has been huge. Josh Hazlewood went home as well. Mitch Swepson has been home and back again. And now Pat Cummins is home. Australia have less of a squad and more of a serving suggestion. And most of the people they had there for the first test seemed injured anyway. And with all due respect to Scott Boland and Matt Renshaw, that was probably not plan A, or B, or maybe even C. And that, with all the bad batting, meant that this whole thing was over. If anything, I am upset Australia has salvaged this tour from hell, because I was looking forward to a good long disaster trip. The next Cricket Australia documentary could have been a reboot of Planes, Trains and Automobiles. That didn't happen because Australia came back from the dead. But how? Well, it all started with India's first session, which was completely bizarre. Rohit Sharma decided to come down the wicket and play a humongous shot, which I'm pretty sure came after when Alex Carey was hit in the face. Here's the thing. When a wicketkeeper is hit in the head, I would think that that means that you should bat slightly more circumspect, whereas India seemed to borrow Australia's arse on fire style. But India kept attacking. Shreyas Iyer cut one back onto his stumps. Ravi Jadeja tried to hit another one through cover. Yes, the wicket was harsh enough to dent Carey's grill, but you couldn't watch India bat and not think that they were doing a few things wrong. Crucially, they lost quick wickets in a big enough cluster that they missed out on what they've been able to do at other times. Cash in when the ball gets soft. The entire innings was gone in the 34th over. So what they had done in other games through Jadeja and Akshar never got a chance to happen. Then the Indian spinners missed their length. Now the conditions had settled down by that point, and sometimes it looks easier just because of that. But this was still a pretty friendly wicket for spin bowling, and India just seemed looser. But of course the Australians didn't run away, and India did get back on top with their bowling. But the problem is they couldn't get on top of them because of how much their batters had disadvantaged them. Remember, Australia won this test with a single half century. Actually, we'll come back to that. It's also worth noting that Australia bowled much better than they had in some of the other games. The first innings might have been a bit of a freebie, but they had been on top at other points in the series and let it go. But I think this was even more notable in the second innings, especially through Todd Murphy. I mean, they really struggled to score off him. And perhaps the only problem in that innings was Matt Kuhneman's 2 overs. But overall, it just felt like Australia put on a lot of pressure. And we should add Mitchell Starc to this as well. Cummins, with a touch of Boland, was largely unimpactful early in the series. In fact, if there was any impact, it was negative. Starc could have taken Rohit Sharma, and probably should have, twice. And he did take Shreyas Iyer. India has got a lot of good overs out of their seamers so far, and Australia finally did, which quite clearly made some kind of a difference. And here is a question I have for you. If you're India, which innings is worse? The obvious answer is the first, because that was an imitation of a chicken without the head on. But I wonder if the second is not more concerning. Shubman Gill did a fairly good KL Rahul impression. Kohli was fairly easily set up. Iyer was disappointing. You know what all this sounds like? Australia's batting in the first 2 tests. Only Pujara seemed to have a sound plan, which again seems a little bit like the Southern Hemisphere team they're playing, who only seems to take 1 batter in per innings. I also want to mention the reviews for a moment, because India seemed to lose their collective sanity with these. Desperation is a pretty good reason why people review when they were behind, but you would still expect the better team that is 2-0 up to at least think their way through it. Show some calmness. I did not see that. And what about Ashwin, their god of spin? Well, he didn't have a good game. And this is part of the normal cycle of being a top athlete. But that doesn't mean that he didn't struggle with his length. Outside of Lyon, there's probably no bowler in world cricket more exact where he lands the ball. But in this match, he didn't have that. In both innings, he bowled a lot of step and hit balls. That's not a very Ashwin thing to do. And I want to add that Australia batted better. Usman Khawaja batted better. And I'm not really looking at the second innings at all. Short chases like that quite often end in that way. I mean, if I was Travis Head, I'd be writing a comedy folk song about my innings. But let's be real, the only time that Australia batted under pressure for an elongated period of time, they still never passed 200. In fact, only one of their batters went beyond 31. India's double failure with the bat allowed Australia to win the game without really making any runs. How many times does that ever happen? So all of these things played a part. But the most obvious reason Australia won is because India reduced the game to a shootout because of the pitch. Rohit Sharma said afterwards that this is the kind of surface that they want to play on. But their incredibly bizarre start kind of mocked that. But if he is right, then I think he's also wrong. Because there is a reason that Test teams have longer winning streaks than ODI or T20 teams, because the further a match goes, the less chance of the weaker side winning. If you reduce that to 2 days and change, one horrendous innings has such a huge part in the overall result. And India's batting has not been fantastic in the last 3 years. Quite a bit of this is of course that they've made their pitches much spicier. But the thing is, if you give average spinners a wicket that assists them to this level, are you also not narrowing a gap between them and your bowlers? If a spin has any pitch, fast or slow, variable bounce, anything like that that will help the tweakers, the best bowlers on that surface are going to be Akshar Patel, Ravi Jadeja and R. Ashwin most of the time, especially over longer periods. But even these three can have a bad session. They might be the best 3 spinners in the world over 90 overs more often than not. But when you make a pitch like this, it does make it a little bit more of a crapshoot, and anyone can have a good session. And you know who needs a lot of spin in Asia to be an effective bowler? It's Nathan Lyon. We have an entire career of evidence that he needs the ball to really be ragging to be brutal in Asia. Looking at Kuhneman's record, he's someone else who looks pretty much built in a Jack Leach kind of way to take a lot of wickets when the ball is ragging. Murphy is still more of a question mark going forward, but I think he showed that this particular wicket was still handy for him even if he didn't pick up the wickets like the other 2 did. Let's put that same attack on an Indian wicket that has at least 2 decent totals in it, and the game would be completely different. And they might still do okay. But in that kind of game, let's say they had to bowl for 150 overs. Would they still outbowl India's trio? Probably not. But that kind of wicket I just talked about, it means that you have to beat India on both sides of the ball. Australia didn't have to do that here. Usman Khawaja made 60. Australia's batting was about as poor as the rest of the series. They didn't pass 200, and they won by 9 wickets. The curator inserted a little bit of randomness into this wicket. Now that might have been accidental because no one who's looking after pitches wants to see the keeper hit on the face in the first session. Yet if we take Rohit at his word, and this is what India wanted, and we can only assume it is because we've now seen a lot of these wickets, then we'll continue to see them beat a lot of teams very quickly. But there is also a chance of them losing to a team that is far worse than them just because of the randomness of it. You know, even the people who put out landmines sometimes step on them by accident. Now, maybe this is just the cost of doing business. This is the Indian cricket team's version of wastage. By having wickets this friendly, their fast bowlers barely have to do any work, meaning they are fresh off when they are needed overseas. Their spin bowlers aren't ground into the dust either, keeping their fingers, elbows and shoulders around for longer. So there are parts of this that do make sense. And it's not that different to when South Africa made all their pitches spicy for their quicks because they figured their batters were tougher and could handle it better. If your batters are on board, this is a very good plan. But if Australia steal the next test, and the Indian batters continue to take as many L's on the field as they do on Twitter, will they continue to be on board? Because since lockdown, the Indian batters have not really made any runs, home or away. India have won 34 tests at home in the last decade, and they have lost only 3. In the first 7 years, they were 26-1, and their batters averaged 45. In the last 3 years, they are 8-2, and their batters averaged 30. Now, one of those losses was because England actually got a nicer wicket to bat on, and also because Jadeja and Akshar were not fit. So it's all a bit murky. But they were winning before. They didn't have to make the wickets like this. And it has come at a cost, because their batters all seem to be in a massive funk at the moment. And they're not wrong to feel that, as Alex Carey's face has shown us. But to get back to our original question, which has a truly hilarious answer. How on earth did Australia win this test? Because the truth is, yeah, India batted poorly and bowled not up to their normal stat. But the thing that allowed Australia to win this was the curator made a pitch so spicy that even the Australian spinners were unplayable. And why is this funny? Because after generations of Australians worrying that some devious Indian curator was twirling his mustache as their left handers tripped over every carefully laid off-spinning plan, the Indore curator finally made a pitch so combustible that it exploded at the first thing it saw. Well, the first 2 things it saw, Alex Carey's face and India's batting line. And it is because of an Indian curator who the Australians have spent decades not trusting that they won this test match.